Alright guys, today we got the iPhone SE 2020 versus the Poco X3 Pro here. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, the price. Both these phones actually cost around the same, around 300 bucks. I'll have those links down below. So let's go ahead and get started with hardware. With the iPhone, you do have a glass and metal design. It's IP67 dust and water resistant. And it is sort of an older design from the front. I think it looks fine from the back. But from the front, you can see bigger bezels and stuff like that, which you don't see on a ton of phones these days. But it does feel good in the hands. A very compact phone. We have a power button, volume rockers, mute vibration switch over here as well. And then we also have your charging port and stereo speakers. On the Poco, we do have a plastic design, so it doesn't feel as premium, of course, as a glass and metal design. But it is a very interesting design. You can see it's sort of out there. You see that big Poco logo, big camera module. So it's a pretty interesting looking phone. We also have our fingerprint scanner, which also acts as a power button as well, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Volume rockers. And then up top, we actually do have, or at the bottom, excuse me, we do have a headphone jack, which the iPhone SE does not have. We also have USB Type-C and stereo speakers on this phone as well. Alright, so the first big difference with these phones is the display quality. So on the iPhone, you have a smaller 4.7-inch display, 720p plus, 326 for the PPI. It's an IPS panel. On the Poco, you have a 6.67-inch display, 120 hertz, HDR10. It's also an IPS panel, but this is 1080p at 395 for the PPI. So right off the rip, you have just a much better display on the Poco. It definitely feels way smoother than the iPhone in terms of scrolling, especially when you're in social media applications and stuff like that. Instagram, scrolling on here with that 120 hertz does feel extremely smooth. Now, as far as display quality, I do think the Poco still is going to offer just an overall better display here. I think it gives off better colors as well too, and you don't have as much bezel as you do on the iPhone. As you can see here, you just have the punch hole, which I think is definitely better. So, you know, overall for display, I think it's a pretty easy win for the Poco. 120 hertz, 1080p. You know, it's just not going to, the iPhone's just not going to beat it because it doesn't have a high refresh rate and it's 720p plus. But saying that, you know, the iPhone does have a really nice display still for compact people who like compact smartphones. It still looks good. You can reach it easily. So there are things that I do like about it, but the overall display quality is just not going to be as good. All right, so we're running iOS 14, of course, and we're running Android 11 with the MIUI 12 skin on the Poco. You have the Snapdragon 860, Adreno 640, micro SD support, 128 gigs of internal storage, and 6 gigs of RAM. On the iPhone, we have the Apple A13 chip, no SD card support, 64 gigs of internal storage, and 3 gigs of RAM. And again, there is a 128 gig configuration as well. But as far as like speed with these phones are both extremely fast. If you just launch some applications here, you'll be able to see, get a quick speed test. See the Poco. Look like the iPhone. Oh, well, no, that was a tie. So you can see that, you can feel that 120 hertz like I was talking about. It's super smooth. So you can see the Poco definitely very fast. iPhone got in there first. What else? We have YouTube, Poco. So you see the Poco is winning most of this. Now the iPhone is really quick with launching games, something that I've always noticed. Oh wow, that was a tie too. So you guys can see just the power of you know, the chip. So you can see they're both pretty much on par with being fast. I think the Poco might be a little bit faster when launching just normal applications. If you look at our Geekbench scores, you can see. So you can see the iPhone wins in the single core, but the Poco wins in the multi-core score as well by a pretty good margin actually. All right, here are your PUBG settings here. So on the SE, you can see we can go up to Ultra HD, extreme frame rates for HDR, as you can see. Poco, same thing, extreme frame rates all the way through. So they pretty much game the exact same. Now the difference is the 120 hertz. You'll notice that kicking in on the Poco for sure, because it'll just feel overall smoother here. That's one thing that I've noticed. So games that are compatible with that 120 hertz, and they have a ton of them in the Play Store that you can just Google and you can check. Like games like Sonic runs extremely well on something like the Poco. But as far as like, you know, being able to game on both these phones, they're both going to be a beast. If you're a gamer, I would lean more towards the Poco because of, I think, well, I'm not going to say that. You might prefer a smaller display, but I think the overall 120 hertz plus the bigger battery, which we're going to talk about, is definitely going to benefit you. But gaming on this phone is also very good as well. On the iPhone, I had zero issues with gaming performance on this phone. It does a really great job, extremely smooth. Both phones are fine when it comes to not overheating and stuff like that. So I was really happy with the performance on both of these phones. Let's check out speaker performance on both. Both phones have stereo speakers. Let's go ahead, max out that volume. So I think it's pretty clear the Poco speaker is obviously much louder and has a more fuller sound. The iPhone SE does have really clear bass though. That's something that I've always been impressed with, but everything else just sounds kind of flatter compared to the Poco X3 over here. It's just not as loud and doesn't thump as hard. Both great speakers, but I give it to the Poco for sure here. Alright, let's talk about getting into the phone. So on the iPhone, you'll only have one option, unfortunately, which works fine. The Touch ID does work fine. It has never failed. It's very fast. You can also use it for NFC or Apple Pay. They both have NFC as well. But on the Poco, like I said, this method is my favorite. Having it in the power button, it's just somewhere where your hands naturally are to me. And also, it's not just that, you also have face unlock on here as well. So you have that option to do face unlock. If I have it set up, yeah, I have it set up. So you have that option to do face unlock. Now let's talk about cameras on both of these guys. So on the iPhone, you do just have a single lens on here. It's a 12 megapixel lens, but it is very good. It shoots in 4K. It's a 7 megapixel selfie, shoots in 1080p. And it does fine for just a single lens. I think it takes great photos actually, especially at this price point. You're in good lighting, you get some really great photos. I think the video on the iPhone SE is super solid as well. So I really do like image quality. I think the colors look really good, detail is there. The only thing I wish it had an extra lens, an ultra wide or a telephoto, something. So that is one thing that I miss on the iPhone, but don't get me wrong, it does take excellent photos. So that's one thing you really don't have to worry about. The Poco is offering a little bit more. So you do have a quad camera setup. It's a 48 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel macro and depth sensor at 4K video, and then a 20 megapixel selfie camera. So you just have more cameras on the Poco to take advantage of. So you have that ultra wide, you have the macro camera where you can get really close in on shots. I think overall image quality is pretty good as well. You get fairly good color signs, good detail with the photo. So I like the cameras on both, but it comes down to you know, are you somebody that's going to be on FaceTime and stuff like that, and you really need, like, you know, that, or are you somebody that really needs to utilize the cameras as far as the ultra wide, depth sensor and stuff like that? So it comes down to personal choice on that one. All right, lastly, let's talk about the battery situation. So on the iPhone, you have a 1821 milliamp battery, 18 watt charging with wireless charging. On the Poco, you also have a massive 5160 milliamp battery, 33 watt charging. So You get wireless charging on the iPhone, you don't get wireless charging on the Poco, but the Poco pretty much destroys the iPhone in terms of battery life and charging speeds. So you'll get way better battery life on this X3 Pro. It's not even funny. So if you need a phone that's gonna last you all day and give you that crazy good battery life, the Poco X3 Pro is where it's at. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.